God bless everybody today. It is November 23rd of 2022. I wanted to go over these paths and eclipses that we're having on this video that I did I think it was about a year ago. I showed these paths and how I thought they would affect us, but then as I've had time to review this, I seem to see a lot more going on here than when I originally had put my first video out. So I just wanted to go over some of those things and show you sort of these connections. Whether they mean anything, I don't know. I just thought I'd give you as much information as possible, and you can make your own decisions on whether this matters or not. So we have 4 different eclipses, 4 different paths, 4 different dates. Let's look at those dates real quick. So the first one in chronological order is August 21st of 2017. You got June 10th of 2021. You got October 14th, 2023, and then April 8th of 2024. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is, well, number one, doesn't that look like a big A over the United States? And hopefully that's not a bad sign for anarchy and civil unrest as we move forward into 23. But I just thought it was really interesting the way this looks. The other thing I think is really interesting is you have this X here, which is over the New Madrid fault line. And then you have another one over here, which is right around San Antonio. And we seem to be getting a lot of earthquake activity between this area and this area. Now, whether that's coincidence or not, I don't know. I just think it's interesting that we're having these things happening as we speak. So if we go back to 2017, August 21st of 2017, and you look at that date, we have had some activity around August, September, and October of 2017. And so I don't know if that is the, moon gravitational pulls affecting the planet or the United States at that moment. So we're getting these small earthquakes and stuff. But we just had another one over that cross of the New Madrid fault line up around Illinois. We've had 11 earthquakes rattle Arkansas and Illinois in just the last 2 days. So this article just posted in the last couple of days talks about these 11 earthquakes that have been rattled Illinois to Arkansas. This all deals with the New Madrid fault line, and that is something that I think people need to be aware of, is where their fault lines are in the United States and how they're going to impact them and where they might live in those areas and how it will affect them. So if we come back to the map here, this first one, like I said, we had some activity in September and October right after this went through, and it always seems like it's about a month off or right around that area, but it's just shortly after that, within a month. We had this go through, and then we had over this area, the New Madrid fault line, we had earthquakes, okay? And I showed you that. Now this New Madrid fault line, just so if you want to see what that looks like, so you can see the area of the New Madrid fault line. And it sort of affects Arkansas, affects Missouri, affects Illinois, affects Indiana, affects Kentucky, Tennessee, and part of Alabama. But this main area here is where you would get the majority of the seismic activity, and then it's going to radiate out depending on the strength of it. So it could actually radiate out to even a further extent. And in this map, you can see that the damage from the December 16th, 1811 magnitude 7.2 earthquake radiated out to a large portion of the United States. And it affected things greatly in these areas. And so it's just something that you need to be aware of. There's many fault lines in the United States, and they run through different areas of the country, and so you need to know where you're positioned with your fault lines in your area. And this map also gives you a little bit of the area of the seismic zone, or the initial impact area that you would feel the majority or the harder activity, and then that will radiate out from this area here. So just realize I just wanted to show you the area so you can see it. Now I know this is a future path, which is October 14th of 2023, that's going to go across San Antonio, and then this 2004 is also going to cross over San Antonio. So I think it's extremely important that we watch where these areas are and how they might affect us. And all these areas seem to be extremely active. This was just on November 18th, which was 5 days ago, we had an earthquake that affected all the way out and radiated to San Antonio. And so if you look at that map, we're looking at San Antonio. So I think there's a lot of activity that's going to happen in these areas. So if you come back out here, these are the three hot, there's this one up here, and I don't know, it's in Canada, and how it affects us down here, I don't really know. There is a date stamp here that I think is sort of interesting as we move forward here. I'll show you how that works. But there's three areas I'm concerned about. One is this New Madrid fault line. We have another spot here over this X, and then we have another one over here, which would affect California, Oregon, and Washington, and up in that area. And so I just think it's really interesting how these things are coming together, how it builds this massive A in the middle of the country. That just really seems interesting, and that it's a 7-year gap between this and this. So even if you add this into it, it's a 7-year gap. You look biblically, God likes sevens, and so will we see a massive amount of seismic increase of activity within this area in the next, couple years? And it's interesting. So if we go out to the paradigm, I think these dates really matter, and so let's sort of break those down. So on this date, we had those 2017. We had some seismic activity. We started into that this cycle that we're in now, I think, to where we're building this, building off of this large A, or this huge anarchy sign within the country, and we started to see potentially just starting to break down. We had that little bit of a recessionary crash in 2018. And so that's something we should look at. But let's look at some of these other dates. So if we go to June 10th of 2021, and if we pull up my paradigm, you'll realize that when the 2300 days, or the portion of the 2300 days or mornings and nights as stated in Daniel, he talks about this, that I indicate that starts from the cleansing or the completion or restoration of the sanctuary, and that would happen during the Feast of Tabernacles on the 17th of October in 2027. If you work that back 2,300 days, that would take you to June 30th. Well, it's sort of interesting that first eclipse over, or it'll actually be the second eclipse over Canada, actually was on June 10th of 2021. Now, whether that means anything or not, other than we possibly might be entering into a new cycle here. So if we go back and look at that, that was June 10th of 2021, and it looks like it's sort of coming towards us. So maybe that's a sign or omen that things are really going to start to break down between 21 and 24. And they have been. So, I don't know, that's just, and maybe it's all coincidence, but it just seems like it's interesting how this is all working. Now, I do realize as these eclipses are going over, we do have gravitational pulls against the country, and so it could be affecting us. So if we go to the next date of 2023 of October 14th, that sort of falls in an interesting time also. So if we go back to the paradigm, there's a date in this area here that seems to really matter, and I want to show you this because I think this really matters and how this could affect this country as we move forward. So let's blow this up and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But we're in this little area here, just so you know where we are on the map. So I indicated the second one was on June 10th of 2021, and so I thought that might be a prelude into this 2300 days. But once you get to that October date, and that date is October 14th, I have that we have a major event that's going to occur, that's going to affect everybody within this gap of October 10th through October 25th of 23. And what that event is that is the attack on Israel by the tenfold nations through Erdogan of Turkey. He starts to besiege Jerusalem based on these verses, and I've gone over this in the paradigm, so I'm not going over that. I just want to show you the correlations with the eclipses in this video. So if Erdogan is actually besieging Jerusalem on October 10th, then you have that October 14th date, and then I have a sixth seal potentially event happening on the 25th, because Erdogan would give these nations 1 hour of power, which is about 15 days in time of 1,000 years of ours to one day of God. And so if you break that down, you realize that that's about 15 days. And I've gone over that also, so I'm not going to do the math on this one. But just realize if there's a 15-day gap here, and we have this passing over October 14th. Now, do realize that I'm not a big one in the Bible that it affects or has anything to do with the United States, because it doesn't. It all radiates over the Middle East. But things that are going on during these times are going to affect us over here. So if we see different things in the star, moon, sun, and different astrological events that are happening over our country during times that might affect the Middle East over here also, that we should be looking at these things. And so if you look at this date of October 14th, and we have this potential besieging of Jerusalem with a sixth seal breaking, is that a prelude that on the 14th, that as this thing's moving through, we're going to get a lot of gravitational pulls that's going to affect this country over those fault lines and over those seismic activity areas. And so I think it's really important that we look at these things. And then if you look at that last date, I think that's extremely important. So the last date, I think, is really interesting because it indicates April 8th of 2024. And if you go to the paradigm, this is right in the middle of two major events that happen when Antichrist is actually on the ground. So that date, remember, was April 8th. And so if you look at these dates, I'm going to slide this down a little. April 8th would fit right here, okay? And this is extremely important because this is where Antichrist would stop those continual burnt offerings 30 days prior to the signing of the treaty with the nations, that 7-year treaty. So, wow, isn't that interesting how that would fit right between these two dates? And so, like I say, I don't know if there's anything here other than if you look at these correlations, maybe they matter as we move forward. And so, if we live in these areas and we're over those X's or over those areas where, it might affect us in those, tectonic plates as these eclipses are going over, and you potentially have a sixth seal event back here, a rising, and the death of Gog and his armies, a rising of Antichrist. He then would come control of the other three regions of Alexander's footprint. We talked about how that breakdown of 10 nations go to 4 nations, go to one beast nation. Those would then, on the sixth seal, we would see that destruction of all 10 nations of Muslims, radical Muslims that go against Israel after they started to besiege them on this date here. You would see 15 days later a sixth seal event. They would bury Erdogan. We would have a resurrection event on the sixth trumpet that would bring in Antichrist. Antichrist then would take control of basically the world, mostly the beast area or the footprint of Alexander, the beast kingdom footprint. But that would radiate out beyond that region. And that there would be this other eclipse, the 7-year gap up to this last eclipse in 2024 prior to the signing of the treaty of the, I call the Covenant of Death, or the 7-year treaty with the nations. So I don't know if there's anything here or not. Like I say, I don't have a crystal ball. All I can do as an analyst is show you the things that I found. What I found is we have a global nightmare on the ground right now. In this country alone, you have a possible rail strike coming up in December. Okay, December 9th is when the rail strike could possibly happen. That would shut down a third of your country, and then that would apply up a lot of pressure to not only the barges and the grain that's going out right now, because we just had harvest. That would also affect the diesel guys, because they can't push that much grain and materials off the trains and different things like that, because I don't know what an average train in the amount of diesel trucks that you would have to load to offload a full train. What the average of those cars would be. It'd be a lot, and we don't have that capacity or drivers or the diesel to be able to do that in the middle of winter, as we're starting to walk into shortages and things like that. So do realize that we do have this rail strike potentially, probably, because now we've had 4 unions basically say they are not going to go along with this contract. And so will the government step in? I've heard people out here in different articles and videos say that even if this strike does happen and then the government would step in to try to stop the strike, that we would see a lot of people just basically quit because the conditions are so terrible. So I just want you to be aware of these things. I don't know if there's anything to it. Was this here potentially a start of a 7-year cycle that will radiate to potentially the time when Antichrist is on the ground in 24? We're going to find out soon. I'm telling you, you need to be watching Daniel 8, these Kurds and Turkey, and how this is going to shape the Middle East, and how that's going to affect us in the next few years. How we potentially have a sixth seal event in October of 23, and how we potentially are going to have a rising of Antichrist in 24, and a signing of a treaty with the nations in April of 24. So, is it going to happen? We're going to find out soon. God bless everybody. Find the open door. Find Jesus. He's the only path here. No matter how bad this gets on the ground, no matter how much this area could shake, God is in control of this whole process. And so, don't worry about it. Just realize you need to do what He tells you. Prepare, prep, put food away, put your oil in your lamp, get ready. The next 5 years is going to be really interesting. God bless and have a great night.